Hi, and welcome to this week's video blog and Some Assembly Required. I'm Sarah Hammaker, and I'm glad you joined me today. Today's video is going to be how to handle tantrums. Now, whether you have a toddler or a teenager, you have tantrums. I don't know any kid who has never thrown a tantrum. Why do kids have tantrums? I can tell you in a nutshell, it's because they want what they want when they want it. It's a visceral reaction to being thwarted by the circumstances or another person. That's why they have tantrums. Frankly, adults have tantrums. Have you ever seen an adult throw a tantrum? It's not a pretty sight. I highly recommend not having adults throw tantrums. I highly recommend training your children when they're young to gain self-control so that they will not be that adult who's throwing stuff around the office when he doesn't get his way, when things don't go. And it doesn't even have to be personally thwarted. It could be circumstances. It could be someone else who does it. We want our children to have the freedom that comes with self-control. A person who is not in control or doesn't have that self-mastery is a person who is not happy, can't possibly be content in life. So this is why helping your child learn how to control his or her own emotions in this for a tantrum is essential. Now let's talk about what is a tantrum. A tantrum is the classic, the kid falls on the floor kicking and screaming because of what they didn't want. Those are tantrums we can understand. However, there are other kinds of tantrums. There's the quiet tantrums. There's the child who refuses to talk but refuses to do anything else either. That is still a tantrum. There is the crying tantrum. Now, I had some of these in my house, let me tell you, where the child would cry because they're so frustrated. That is still a tantrum. A tantrum, by its definition, is what a child does when a child is frustrated with herself, with another person, with the circumstances, and that comes out in a way that is either they're acting crazy, or they're internalizing it, but they're still acting crazy on the inside. So what I'm going to give in this video is my top 3 tips for tantrums and how to implement those. The top 3 tips are: ignore the tantrum, establish a tantrum place, and never give in to a tantrum. So let's talk with ignore the tantrum. It's hard to ignore a screaming child on the floor. I get it. But the more that you try to communicate with that child in the throes of the tantrum, the more you feed it, because tantrums grow with an audience. That is just the truth. When you can ignore the tantrums will not be as fierce or be as long. Have you ever seen a parent try to talk to their child who's in the throes of a tantrum? It's not a pretty sight, because I just really want to walk up to the parent and say, just stop. We're okay. Let the kids scream. But it's really hard, especially if you're in a public place, and I have had kids throw tantrums in public places. You probably have had kids throw tantrums in public places, or you've seen it. Give the parent a break. I always try to give them a sympathetic smile. If I can, I will try to offer encouragement, because it's hard. It's hard when you feel like everyone's looking at you and your child is an out-of-control screaming mess. And it doesn't reflect on your parenting, because kids are kids and kids are responsible for their own actions. And you can't always control their actions because they're not your child. They're not, because you're not that child. Okay, so ignore the tantrum as best you can. We had to do this with one of our children in school. Used to have crying tantrums, and so alarm the teachers to no end. And so we worked with her, and we just told the teacher, said, look, I said, just ignore her. Ignore her, and she will be able to come back and calm herself. And that worked, because the more the teacher paid attention to her, the harder she cried, the more frustrated she was. All right, so that's Interim Place. And by that, I mean like an unused powder room, a guest room, some place where the child can go to get control of herself. It can be the bottom of a stairs. It can be a corner. And this is not for punishment. You are not telling the child, go to this place for such and such a long time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. This is not time out. This is a place for your child to go so that they can recover their own equilibrium, so that they can regain control of themselves. This is very important because it gives the child the responsibility of regaining control. If you tell a child you're going to sit there for 5 minutes, it may take 2 minutes for the child to get under control. It may take 20. So you can't put that time limit on there, but you tell the child, when you're calm, you can come out. And then you can deal with anything else that happened at the tantrums. If they hit somebody, if they broke something, if they misbehaved in a store, whatever. You can handle that later. First, we're going to help the child regain control, because you cannot talk to a child. You cannot level punishment on a child. You will escalate tantrums much quicker if you start saying, well, now you're not going to have this and now you're not going to have that. Let the child calm down. Then you can talk about consequences. And frankly, sometimes we need to calm down. Tantrums can make parents crazy because the child is out of control. We're embarrassed, especially if it's in public or in front of relatives or friends or something. It can make us crazy. And so we can say things in the heat of the moment that maybe we shouldn't say and we're not going to be able to do. And we also escalate that tantrum. I think of the Proverbs where it says, do not make your children angry. I think that when a child is in a tantrum, piling on things and trying to talk to them and pointing out what they did wrong escalates that, makes that child angry. I think that's similar to what the proverb is talking about, is that we need to have a care that we don't contribute to helping our children sin by piling on when they're in the tantrum. All right, so establish a tantrum place. Number 3, never give in to a tantrum. When you give a child something, when a child wants a toy at the store and they throw a tantrum on the floor and you give them the toy, you're telling them that their out of control emotions are going to get them somewhere. And that's not the message that you want. Now, we've all done this occasionally. I am not perfect, but I tried very hard to never give in to a tantrum. And was hard. It was hard because I know if I did, the screaming would stop. But that's a temporary thing. Temporary, you are robbing Peter to pay Paul. You are getting short-term gain and messing up the long term, because you are not helping your child develop that self-control. And if they don't develop that self-control, they're going to have a host of other problems later. Self-control is so important, that self-mastery. So learning how to handle tantrums, that's very, very, very important to do. But it takes time. It takes time and it takes effort. So I want you to commit, no matter how old your child is, to following these 3 simple tips. Ignore when you can. They go to a tantrum place. Never give in. Consistent application of those will greatly reduce tantrums. It will not eliminate tantrums. There is no magic bullet, magic parenting tip that's going to completely eliminate tantrums. I can't do it. You can't do it. Nobody can do it. But following these tips will greatly reduce the tantrums. Well, thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a tantrum-free afternoon or evening. Thank you. Rule number 1, ignore the tantrum when you can. Establish a tantrum place. If your child to learn control on his or herself.